Okay. So let's talk about permitted expenditures from a trust. So you've now got your trust up. You've now passed away, or you have a living trust, and you now have a trustee. We'll talk about trustees in a bit. But now, what can we use these funds for? So let's say you have this fund set up, and so we're guided predominantly by, again, legislation and regulation. The ministry has some guidance for us in terms of what we can use the trust fund for. And maybe I'll just read them for those that don't have the PowerPoint. Um, but the trust fund can be utilized for a number of specific items. Caregiver services related to that person's disability, education or training, home renovations because of disability, home maintenance repairs, medical aids, and then the other clause, the one that's probably the most important for us, is items that promote independence. Now, it used to be that when we were utilizing the independence clause in terms of distribution, there was a limit of $8,000 a year. Um, and so trustees had to ensure that they were being compliant with that sort of limit. But effective December 1 of 2015, the province now lifted that limit. So the clause for independence is now unlimited. So you could conceivably use as much of the trust fund as you wish for independence. And so the next question is, well, what is independence? And in the eyes of independence, or the ministry, I should say, they say, well, independence is what the trustee and the beneficiary consider independence to be. They don't micromanage. They don't tell you that it must be for this or it must be for that. They delegate that responsibility to the trustee.
There's no ministry test for that.
There is not, but
right.
There isn't a requirement to ensure that you're keeping good records. And so if you are spending money out of the trust, you'll want to ensure that you designate it as independence or as caregiver services or education. The one thing I'll just outline, though, is that, and I think this is really important in managing a trust for a trustee, and that is recognizing that a person that is receiving PWD benefits is likely going to be eligible for other resources within government. And so, home care, for example, CLBC funding, prescriptions, medical equipment. And so we want to make sure that our trustee is not dipping into the trust fund if there are resources available within the province. So one of the things that I would suggest in designing that trust is ensuring that your trustee is aware of the need to explore other government resources. In fact, I go even a little further in the design of my trust and stipulate that a trustee must exhaust all resources out there that are available before dipping into the trust fund. We don't want to develop a situation where government now says, well, you've got a trust fund. Let's use that trust fund to fund that wheelchair you need. And so we want to balance the two, but we also want to recognize that in the age where resources are tapped governmentally, maybe an ability to receive funding for a portion of resources from government and perhaps not be able to achieve additional items above and beyond. An example is, an electric wheelchair that's sort of standard might be eligible, but you might need certain adaptations to that chair that the ministry might not cover. You want your trustee to have the flexibility to use the fund if necessary. So it's a bit of a balancing act, I think. And I think the key is, and I think it goes to just demonstrating the amount of knowledge that a trustee has to have.
I was just going to make the comment. I think that speaks to the question earlier around how do you decide the trustee, and it has to be someone who's resourceful and able to exhaust and do some research and things like that. There is a question, and that goes back to about whether a residence can be in the trust. And the question is, if the residence is within the trust, can the mortgage payment be paid by the person with the disability through the trust?
Sure. So definitely the individual could contribute to the mortgage. The mortgage would be in the name of the trust, not the individual with the disability, though. And so this is where this balancing act of ensuring that you still maintain your shelter component is designed properly. And I think, in designing a plan where there may be a mortgage, first of all, there needs to be acceptance from the financial institution that a mortgage is going to be granted, because now we're dealing with a trustee. So there needs to be able to substantiate all the requirements. It may be the trustee that actually is vetted for the mortgage, and the person with the disability may not be eligible. So it may be that the trust actually has the mortgage, and the person with the disability is simply contributing rent
Right.
to that mortgage, but the responsibility lies with the actual trust. Again, that's under the circumstance where the trust owns the asset. The trust is the legal owner, and therefore the mortgage would relate to the trust itself.